Oh, the next chapter has to do with the world of electronic media, focusing in on television and radio, which, again, going back to the last chapter, we talked about how print media, the perception out there is that newspapers are dinosaurs, they're dying, and while they do have their challenges, and similar to what we're seeing in this chapter with television, is that people still do watch a lot of TV. So thinking that traditional media like newspapers and TV are no longer viable options for public relations professionals is simply not true. It's just that in both cases, the nature of how they're run has changed dramatically. Certainly with television, the chapter opens up talking about the rise of 24/7 news channels, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and the way that these news channels are now defining what they consider to be news and some of the challenges that come out of television news talk shows, whether it be Fox's The O'Reilly Factor or MSNBC's Countdown with Keith Olbermann, where we're seeing a real bias in the way that the terms of the quote unquote news is being delivered. So that it poses some challenge on the PR side because in a lot of times you're not sure what you're going to get when you're trying to get publicity through or get your news picked up through one of these mediums. So certainly studying and understanding the way that television news works today is good to do, especially in terms of cable news. Now let's bring it down to a local level. The way that our local television news and local radio stations operate, whether it be Channel 11 for television or KOAC radio for on the radio side, that those the same type of approaches that you use in working with media to get publicity is going to be true at that. We have a very good, I think, local media market that works very well with organizations within the community to get their news out and to look for ways to add some publicity as well. I'll talk about that. I'll talk about that momentarily. The book talks about how to handle a television interview. Now, you could say, you know what, I'm really not going into public relations. I'm taking this class as an elective for my applied business degree or whatever. But knowing how to handle yourself in front of the camera is a great skill to learn because you never know, especially if you're here in Fairbanks, where you might be, picked out of a crowd by someone like Daryl Lewis from Channel 11 or Micah Johnson from Fox 7 and be asked to respond on camera to something. So the checklist, which is on page, I think, 205, gives some good ideas for how to handle yourself on television. It's an intimidating process. And when I used to teach this class, in an actual classroom, we would actually bring in a camera and do mock interviews. If you're a PR person for your organization, that's a good thing to do, is to see just how do you look in front of camera and how do you handle yourself, and do some mock interviews and practice runs so that when the time comes and you've got reporter A has their microphone in front of you and the camera running, you know how to handle yourself very well. A couple things this chapter talks about that I don't spend a lot of time covering on the quizzes because we don't, again, bringing it to a more practical matter of how you might handle it locally. VNRs, video news releases, and satellite media tours. Now, one thing that is mentioned in the VNRs is the idea of organizations having B-roll footage to supply to media. And B-roll footage is footage that you have within your organization, kind of stock video footage that shows whether it be an assembly line or just some generic footage that television news can use if they're doing a story on you. We do a lot of that here at UAF, especially when working with national and international media in terms of when they're doing a story on one of our researchers. A lot of times they're not going to come up here and get their own footage. They're going to ask us, do you have video footage of researcher A out conducting their permafrost studies or some sort of research? And so we try to build up a library of that and have that ready for those national and international media calls. Also talked about in this chapter are public service announcements, which are widely used here in Fairbanks and in any media market. especially with radio stations who will use these public service announcements, whether they be 30 seconds or 60 seconds, to announce local events or public affairs type of news that's happening within interior Alaska. So knowing how to write a PSA, and if maybe you're involved with a local nonprofit in town as a board member, you might find yourself using a PSA as a way to get some coverage for an event that your organization is doing. A little bit of time spent towards the end talking about radio and getting involved with talk radio. We have a great radio market here in Fairbanks. Radio is thriving, alive and well here within interior Alaska, and whether it be the Clear Channel stations over or New Northwest, we've got stations that are very responsive to the needs of the community. And just a great example of how we've done that at the university, partnering with Clear Channel Radio, is every Wednesday morning we've been allowed the opportunity to go down to Clear Channel Radio and bring a guest from the university, a faculty member or a researcher or a student, and we do a live on-air interview with Charlie O'Toole on AM 970, and then also with Peter Van Noort and J.B. Carnahan on the FM side on 102.5. The station sees it as being a way to provide some informative news to its audience, and certainly from the university standpoint, it's a great way for us to reach out to the community. So here in Fairbanks, again, great radio and great TV stations that operate in a way that they're really looking out for the best interests of the community. So some of the things that this chapter talks about in terms of biases from the larger cable networks and the talk shows, we don't see that here. So let's use that to our advantage and to your advantage and to the advantage of your organization to get the news out there that you want to get. So we will see you with the next chapter.